Another one of those unsupervised hood kids, Officer Brent Kessler muttered, eyes narrowing beneath mirrored shades as he stalked across the quiet suburban park. To him, the small black boy painting a birdhouse beneath the sycamore was a nuisance, an easy target to flex his authority on. The child's calm politeness only fueled his contempt. He saw trembling hands, not quiet courage. What Kessler didn't see was the man just across the street, Marcus Ellison, off-duty, level-headed, and newly appointed police chief. One slap would awaken the wrong father, and this town would never sleep quietly again. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The morning sun filtered through the sycamore leaves, casting dappled shadows on Veterans Green. Jaden Ellison sat cross-legged on a worn, checkered blanket, his tongue poking out slightly as he concentrated on the wooden pieces before him. The birdhouse kit was spread around him like a puzzle waiting to be solved. "Now, what's the next step, young man?" Miss Wheezy called from her usual bench. Her knitting needles clicked steadily as she watched him work. Jaden held up the instruction sheet, squinting at the diagrams. "It says to attach the roof pieces first, Miss Wheezy." He carefully lined up two smooth wooden panels, making sure the edges matched perfectly. "Take your time," she said, adjusting her reading glasses. "A house needs a strong foundation, whether it's for people or birds." The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass and early spring flowers. Other park visitors strolled by, elderly couples walking their dogs, mothers pushing strollers, joggers in bright clothing. Everyone seemed to know Miss Wheezy, offering warm greetings as they passed. "Morning, Miss Louise," called a parks worker, pushing his cart of gardening tools. "Good morning, Jimmy," she replied, never missing a stitch in her knitting. "The tulips are looking lovely this year." Jaden carefully applied wood glue to the joints of his birdhouse, just as his father had shown him. Marcus had spent last night going over the instructions with him, pointing out the importance of taking time to do things right. "Hey, champ!" Marcus's voice came from behind, making Jaden smile. His father stood there in jeans and a light jacket, looking relaxed on his Saturday off. "Dad, look how much I've done already." Jaden pointed proudly to his progress. Marcus crouched down, examining the careful construction. "That's some fine craftsmanship there, son." He ruffled Jaden's hair. "Those sparrows are going to have a 5-star hotel." "When do you think they'll come?" Jaden asked eagerly. Marcus laughed, the sound warm and deep. "Can't rush nature, Jay. Be patient. Sparrows come to those who wait." He checked his watch. "I've got some errands to run, but I'll be back later. You mind Miss Wheezy, okay?" "Yes, sir." Jaden nodded, already reaching for his paintbrush. Miss Wheezy waved as Marcus headed toward the parking lot. "That father of yours is right about patience," she said, setting aside her knitting to pull out her ever-present notebook. "In all my years teaching, I found that was the hardest lesson for children to learn." Jaden carefully opened the small container of blue paint. "Did you teach a long time, Miss Wheezy?" 43 years, she said, making a note in her book. "Taught right here in Stone Ridge Elementary until I retired. Had your father in my class too, if you can believe it." "Really?" Jaden's eyes widened. "What was he like?" Miss Wheezy chuckled. "Just like you, curious about everything, always asking questions." She watched as Jaden applied careful strokes of paint to the birdhouse. "And just as meticulous, too." The morning stretched on peacefully. Jaden painted each section of the birdhouse with careful attention, wiping away any drips before they could dry. Miss Wheezy alternated between her knitting and her notebook, occasionally offering advice or sharing stories about the park's history. "Veterans Green wasn't always so pretty," she told him. "When I was a girl, it was just an empty lot. The whole community came together to make it what it is today. A slight breeze rustled through the sycamore leaves, carrying the sweet scent of nearby flowering bushes. Jaden had just finished painting the roof a brilliant blue when movement caught his eye. There, not 3 feet away, a white-throated sparrow hopped across the grass. Its distinctive black and white striped head turned this way and that, checking for danger before moving closer to investigate the new addition to its territory. "Miss Wheezy, look!" Jaden whispered excitedly, trying not to startle the bird. She smiled, setting down her knitting. "Well, would you look at that? Looks like patience works after all." They shared a quiet laugh, watching the sparrow hop closer to inspect Jaden's handiwork. The morning felt perfect, the sun warm on their faces, the grass soft beneath the blanket, the peaceful atmosphere of the park wrapping around them like a comfortable blanket. In the distance, a dark pickup truck pulled up to the curb. Its engine continued to run, the low rumble barely noticeable among the cheerful sounds of the park. The noise blended with the background, children's laughter from the playground, dogs barking in the distance, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. The truck sat there, idling, as life in Veterans Green continued its Saturday morning routine. The late morning sun hung high in the cloudless sky, its heat shimmering off the park's metal benches and playground equipment. Officer Brent Kessler's patrol truck pulled up to the curb, its dark bulk casting a shadow across the freshly mowed grass. He sat there for a moment, eyes narrowed behind mirrored sunglasses, scanning Veterans Green like a hawk searching for prey. Finding nothing to justify his suspicion didn't improve his mood. He stepped out, adjusting his belt with its carefully arranged gear, and began a slow walk toward the playground. His boots crunched deliberately on the gravel path, announcing his presence to everyone nearby. Jaden was adding final touches to his birdhouse, carefully wiping excess paint from the edges when the shadow fell across his work. He looked up to find Officer Kessler looming over him, hands on his belt, a smile that didn't reach his eyes fixed on his face. "You the one hanging things from city property?" Kessler's voice dripped with false politeness, the kind adults used when they'd already decided you were in trouble. "No, sir," Jaden replied carefully, his father's lessons in respectful behavior kicking in automatically. "It's not nailed or anything. Just going to tie it with twine, like the instructions say." Kessler began circling Jaden's workspace, boots crushing the edge of the checkered blanket. "Instructions say?" he mimicked, emphasizing Jaden's slight grammatical slip. "And where exactly are your parents? Or did you just decide to come vandalize the park all by yourself?" Miss Wheezy set down her knitting, her weathered hands folding carefully in her lap. "Officer, he's 9 years old and has permission to be here. I've been watching him all morning." "9 or 19 doesn't matter," Kessler snapped, his facade of politeness cracking. "You people always think you can do whatever you want." The words carried across the suddenly quiet park. Nearby joggers slowed their pace, sensing the growing tension. Jaden instinctively took a step back, his shoulders hunching slightly. The movement seemed to trigger something in Kessler, who lunged forward and grabbed Jaden's arm. His fingers dug into the boy's skin as he twisted, forcing Jaden to face him. "Stand still when an officer's talking to you," Kessler growled. "Let's see some ID." "Officer, I told you he's 9. Miss Wheezy's voice rose as she stood from her bench, her notebook clutched tightly. "You're hurting him." Kessler's free hand shot out, shoving Miss Wheezy's outstretched arm away. "Stay out of this, nosy old lady. This isn't your business." Jaden's eyes filled with tears, more from fear than pain. "Please, sir, you're hurting me," he whispered, his voice trembling. The sound of fear in Jaden's voice seemed to enrage Kessler further. His face flushed red, veins standing out on his neck. "Don't talk back," he shouted, and before anyone could move, his hand flashed through the air. The crack of the slap echoed across Veterans Green like a gunshot. Birds exploded from the nearby trees in a panic of wings and alarmed calls. Jaden stumbled backward, losing his balance and hitting the ground hard. His hand went to his cheek, where an angry red mark was already forming. Gasps rippled through the growing crowd of onlookers. Parents pulled their children closer. Phones appeared in raised hands, and Miss Wheezy's face contorted with fury. "You monster!" she screamed, her usual composure shattered by the sight of violence against a child. Kessler straightened up, his chest puffing out as he breathed heavily. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the morning chill. "Learn your place," he growled, his voice carrying the weight of years of unchecked authority. His boot lashed out, catching Jaden's sketchbook and sending it skidding across the grass, loose papers fluttering in its wake. A cruel smile twisted his lips as he looked down at the frightened boy. "Now, pick that up," he commanded, "and say, 'Sir.'" Jaden looked up at Kessler, his hand still pressed against his stinging cheek. Something shifted in his eyes, fear giving way to something stronger, something inherited from generations of people who refused to bend. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried clearly in the tense silence. "No." The single word hung in the air like a challenge. Kessler's face darkened with rage, his hand tightening on his belt. The crowd held its collective breath, watching the confrontation between the towering officer and the small boy who dared to defy him. Across the street, Marcus Ellison stepped out of the hardware store, a bag of supplies in his hand. His eyes swept the park automatically, a habit born from years of service, and locked onto the scene before him. His son on the ground, a uniformed officer standing over him with clenched fists, and a crowd of horrified onlookers frozen in place. The bag dropped from Marcus's hand, hitting the sidewalk with a crash. Without hesitation, he broke into a sprint toward the park, his feet barely touching the ground as he raced to reach his son. Marcus's feet pounded against the grass as he charged across Veterans Green, his heart thundering in his chest. "Get your hands off him," he roared, his voice carrying the full weight of a father's protective fury. Officer Kessler spun around at the shout, his body automatically shifting into a defensive stance. His right hand drifted toward his holster, fingers twitching. The morning sun glinted off his badge, a symbol of authority that now seemed twisted and wrong. Miss Wheezy moved quickly despite her age, hurrying to Jaden's side. Her hands trembled as she helped him up, brushing grass from his clothes. "It's okay, baby," she murmured, though her own voice shook with anger. "Your daddy's here now." People gathered around the unfolding scene, mothers clutching their children's hands, joggers frozen mid-stride, teenagers with phones raised high to capture every moment. The crowd formed a loose circle, their faces a mix of shock, anger, and fear. Marcus covered the remaining distance in seconds, coming to a stop directly in front of Kessler. They stood nose to nose, the tension crackling between them like electricity before a storm. Marcus's chest heaved with controlled breaths, his eyes locked on the officer who'd dared to strike his son. "You just assaulted a child." Marcus's words cut through the morning air, sharp as a blade. His hands were clenched at his sides, every muscle in his body straining against the urge to respond with force. Kessler's lip curled into a sneer, his stance widening as if preparing for conflict. "Kid resisted lawful orders," he spat back. His eyes narrowed behind his mirrored sunglasses. "You interfering now?" Marcus's fury simmered beneath a lifetime of learned control. His voice dropped lower, taking on the dangerous edge of a man holding back a tsunami of rage. He jabbed a finger toward the gleaming badge on Kessler's chest. "Name." "Now." Kessler reached into his breast pocket with deliberate slowness, pulling out a business card. He shoved it against Marcus's chest with enough force to make him step back. "File it," he sneered, voice dripping with contempt. "Won't go far?" The screech of tires announced the arrival of another patrol car. Sergeant Nate Doyle emerged, his experienced eyes quickly taking in the scene before him. The angry officer, the protective father, the frightened child with a reddened cheek, and the crowd of witnesses with their phones still recording. "Everyone take a step back," Doyle commanded, moving between Marcus and Kessler with practiced efficiency. He placed a firm hand on Kessler's shoulder, pushing him away from Marcus. "Officer Kessler, stand down." "Now." Kessler resisted for a moment, his body rigid with defiance, before finally taking 2 steps backward. His face twisted into an ugly expression as he leaned around Doyle. "You'll regret this," he mouthed at Marcus, malice glinting in his eyes. Doyle turned to Marcus, his voice lowering. "Sir, I suggest you take your boy home. We'll sort this out properly." There was something in his eyes as he looked at Marcus, a flicker of recognition, a careful nod that spoke volumes. He knew exactly who Marcus was, even if Kessler didn't. Jaden broke away from Miss Wheezy's protective embrace and ran to his father, wrapping his arms around Marcus's waist. The red mark on his cheek had begun to swell, a visible testament to Kessler's brutality. Marcus placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder, fighting to keep his own trembling under control. Miss Wheezy stood nearby, her notebook open as she carefully recorded badge numbers, times, and details with the precision of a longtime teacher. Her pen moved steadily across the page, though her hands still shook with anger. She looked up briefly to meet Marcus's eyes, giving him a firm nod that promised her support. The crowd began to disperse slowly, though phones remained raised, capturing every moment. Parents whispered to each other, shooting worried glances at Kessler. Joggers resumed their routes, looking back over their shoulders. The tension in the air remained thick enough to cut. Marcus guided Jaden toward their car, keeping his body between his son and Kessler. Each step felt like an eternity, his protective instincts screaming at him not to turn his back on the threat. But he knew this wasn't the time or place for the confrontation his heart demanded. They reached the car, and Marcus helped Jaden into the back seat, checking his seatbelt with trembling hands. As he slid behind the wheel, he caught sight of Kessler in the rearview mirror. The officer stood watching them leave, a smirk playing across his face, looking for all the world like a man who believed himself untouchable. Marcus started the engine, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Around them, the park was returning to its normal rhythm, though an undercurrent of unease lingered in the air. In the distance, sirens wailed faintly. Their sound carried on the warming breeze, as if the city itself was crying out against the injustice they'd just witnessed. The sun continued its climb toward noon, casting long shadows across Veterans Green as Marcus drove away with his injured son, leaving behind a scene that would soon shake their entire community to its core. The evening light faded to purple through the kitchen windows as Vivian gently pressed an ice pack against Jaden's swollen cheek. Their son winced but stayed still, his usual energy dampened by the day's trauma. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, marking time in a house that felt different now. Less safe, less certain. "Hold it there, baby," Vivian murmured, adjusting the ice pack. Her nurse's training showed in her careful movements, but her hands betrayed a slight tremor. She'd seen too many injuries in the ER, too many victims of violence. But this was her son. This was different. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, bent over a stack of forms Sergeant Doyle had brought by. The civilian complaint paperwork demanded details, times, witness names. Each box he filled made his jaw clench tighter. The preliminary report lay open beside him, its sanitized language a mockery of what had really happened. "Subject displayed non-compliant behavior," Marcus read aloud, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Officer attempted to maintain order through standard crowd control measures." They're painting him as some kind of teenage troublemaker. Vivian's eyes flashed. He's 9 years old. He was building a birdhouse. She smoothed Jaden's hair back from his forehead, her touch gentle, but her words sharp. They can't just rewrite reality. They're already trying. Marcus pushed the preliminary report aside and reached for another complaint form. Doyle says we need to file this tonight. Get our version on record before they can bury it deeper. Jaden shifted in his chair, lowering the ice pack. The bruise had darkened to an angry purple, stark against his brown skin. "Dad," he said quietly, "why did he hit me? I wasn't doing anything wrong." The question hung in the air, heavy with all the weight of innocence confronting injustice. Marcus and Vivian exchanged a look, the same one they'd shared too many times before, when their son encountered the world's uglier truths. Some people, Vivian began carefully, carry hate inside them. And when they have power, they use it to hurt others. But that's about them, not you. You did nothing wrong, baby. Nothing. Marcus's pen pressed so hard against the complaint form that the paper nearly tore. The rage he'd contained at the park still burned in his chest, but now it had crystallized into something colder and more focused. He knew the system from the inside, its weak points, its pressure points, its hiding places for ugly truths. "We need to be smart about this," Vivian said, reading his tension. She moved behind his chair, placing her hands on his shoulders. "The chief's announcement isn't for 2 more weeks. If we reveal that card too early, they'll close ranks," Marcus finished. "Start covering tracks, destroying evidence." His hands spread across the scattered paperwork. "We need to document everything first. Build our case." Vivian squeezed his shoulders. "Exactly. Let them think you're just an angry father. Let them underestimate us." Jaden yawned, the day's stress finally catching up with him. The ice pack drooped in his hand, and his eyes had grown heavy. Vivian immediately shifted into mother mode, her voice softening. "Time for bed, sweetheart. You've been so brave today." She helped him up, keeping one arm around his shoulders. "Want me to read you a story?" Jaden nodded, leaning against her side. As they headed for the stairs, he paused and looked back at Marcus. "Dad, we're not going to let him hurt any other kids, right?" Marcus met his son's eyes, seeing not just the bruise, but the determination beneath it. "No, son, we're not, I promise." After they went upstairs, Marcus spread the paperwork across the kitchen table like a general planning a campaign. He started a fresh legal pad, noting times, locations, badge numbers. He wrote down Miss Wheezy's contact information and the names of other witnesses from the park. Each detail was a piece of armor, each fact a weapon. The sound of Vivian reading drifted down from upstairs, something about dragons and knights, and justice prevailing. Marcus allowed himself a small smile, remembering simpler times when bedtime stories could fix anything. But this story would need more than knights and dragons. It would need patience, strategy, and perfect timing. He heard Vivian's soft footsteps on the stairs a while later. She came back to the kitchen, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "He's finally asleep," she whispered. "Took 3 stories and 2 glasses of water. But he's out." Marcus covered her hands with his own, drawing strength from her presence. "I wanted to tear that officer apart today," he admitted quietly. "When I saw Jaden on the ground." "I know." Vivian's voice held the same controlled fury. "But that's what they want. Any excuse to paint us as the aggressors. We're smarter than that." A faint sound drew their attention to the window. The slow crunch of tires on pavement. Marcus moved to the living room, staying back from the glass as he peered out. A patrol car rolled past their house at a crawl, its lights off, barely visible in the growing darkness. The message couldn't have been clearer. They were being watched. Vivian joined him at the window, her hand finding his in the darkness. They stood together, watching the patrol car disappear around the corner, its passage marking the beginning of a battle they'd never wanted but couldn't avoid. Their home, once a sanctuary, now felt like the front line of a war they'd been drafted into, with their son's safety and justice itself hanging in the balance. The fluorescent lights hummed in the empty station as Marcus approached Sergeant Doyle's desk. Past midnight, only a skeleton crew remained, their radios crackling softly in the darkness. Marcus carried a single manila folder, his steps measured and controlled despite the anger still burning in his chest. Doyle looked up from his computer, his weathered face showing recognition. "Figured you'd come," he said quietly, gesturing to the chair across from him. "How's your boy?" "Bruised, scared." Marcus's jaw tightened. "But stronger than they think." Doyle nodded slowly, glancing at the security cameras before leaning forward. "Listen, about Kessler's record." He tapped his keyboard, frowning at the screen. "It's complicated. I need to see everything, Nate. Every complaint, every write-up." Marcus kept his voice low, steady. "There's a pattern here. I can feel it." "That's just it." Doyle rubbed his temples. "Most of those records, they're not exactly accessible anymore. Department has this new wellness program. Complaints get archived after 90 days if they're marked as minor force incidents." Marcus's fingers dug into the folder. "Archived or erased?" "Both, maybe. Systems designed that way." Doyle's eyes darted to the hallway. "Look, I've been here 20 years, seen good cops and bad ones. Kessler, he's got protection." High up, in a dimly lit office across town, Officer Brent Kessler sat across from Harold Pike, the police union president. Pike's desk was massive, dark wood gleaming under a green banker's lamp. The walls were covered with plaques and certificates, badges of authority. "Don't worry about a thing," Pike said, his smile oily and confident. "This isn't the first time some bleeding hearts tried stirring up trouble. We know how to handle it." Kessler shifted in his chair. "Kid was disrespecting." Pike held up a hand. "Save it. Reports already filed. Subject was non-compliant, showed aggressive behavior, minimal force required to maintain order." He chuckled. "Standard procedure." "What about the old lady?" "She was writing everything down. Unreliable witness. Elderly, emotional, probably confused about what she saw." Pike pulled out a thick folder. "We'll bury this under so much paperwork, they'll give up before they find bottom." Sunday morning sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of First Baptist Church. Miss Wheezy sat in her usual pew, her notebook clutched tight against her floral dress. Around her, the congregation buzzed with whispered conversations. "I saw it with my own eyes," she told Mrs. Henderson, her voice shaking but determined. "That officer slapped that sweet boy for nothing more than building a birdhouse. Nothing more than existing while black in that park." The whispers spread like ripples in a pond. Deacon Williams frowned deeply. Sister Martha gasped. Young Timothy Jones, who played basketball with Jaden, looked scared. "And they're trying to cover it up," Miss Wheezy continued, her aged fingers tracing the careful notes she'd made. "But I was a teacher for 43 years. I know how to document things properly." More church members gathered around, their faces showing shock, anger, concern. Pastor Roberts approached slowly, his expression grave. "Miss Louise," he said gently, "perhaps we should pray about this situation." "Oh, I'm praying, Pastor," she replied firmly. "Praying and acting. The Lord expects us to do both." The story moved through the congregation like wind through leaves. Parents who'd seen it shared details. Others remembered similar incidents, times when Kessler had been too rough, too quick to escalate. The church's usual post-service piece was replaced with urgent discussions and exchanged phone numbers. Back home, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by papers. Vivian brought him coffee, her hospital scrubs still on from her night shift. "Any progress?" she asked, touching his shoulder. "Some." Marcus gestured at his notes. 3 witnesses from the park gave statements. Parks Department confirmed no rules against temporary birdhouses. But Kessler's record… He shook his head in frustration. "They're hiding things," Vivian said. It wasn't a question. Worse, they've built a system to make things disappear. Legal erasure. Marcus picked up his coffee, but didn't drink. "How many other families, Viv? How many other kids?" The laptop chimed with a new email. Marcus clicked it open, then went still. Vivian leaned over his shoulder to read, "You're making a mistake, challenging this department." The words glowed harsh and white against the black screen. No sender name, no signature. Just the threat, hanging there like poison. Vivian squeezed Marcus's shoulder harder. "They're scared of you." "Good." Marcus closed the laptop slowly. They should be. Outside their window, the Sunday morning continued peacefully. Children played in nearby yards, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Birds hopped between tree branches, unconcerned with human disputes. But beneath this calm surface, the town of Stone Ridge was changing. In living rooms and church halls, on front porches and in quiet conversations, people were choosing sides. Miss Wheezy's testimony spread, joining with other long-silenced voices. The wall of silence that had protected men like Kessler was beginning to crack, one whispered truth at a time. The grand chamber of Stone Ridge City Hall buzzed with anticipation. Morning sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. Council members sat in their high-backed chairs, while reporters lined the walls with cameras ready. In the front row, uniformed officers filled the seats, their badges gleaming. Officer Brent Kessler slouched in his chair, picking at a loose thread on his sleeve. Next to him, other officers whispered about the mysterious new chief. Some outsider the mayor had chosen without their input. Harold Pike stood near the podium, his usual smirk firmly in place as he worked the room, shaking hands and patting shoulders. "All rise," the clerk announced. The room rustled to attention. Mayor Gloria Chen approached the podium, her red blazer bright against the wood paneling. "Today marks a new chapter for Stone Ridge law enforcement," she began. "Our city deserves leadership that understands both authority and accountability. Someone who knows our streets, our challenges, and our potential." Pike nodded along, already planning how to manage this new chief. Behind him, Kessler checked his phone, barely listening. "Please welcome," Mayor Chen continued, "our new chief of police." Marcus Ellison emerged from the side door, in full dress uniform, shoulders straight, each step precise. The gasps started like a wave, rippling through the crowd as recognition dawned. Kessler's phone clattered to the floor. His face went slack, then flushed dark red as he remembered the park, the slap, the smugness afterward. Next to him, Officer Martinez whispered, "Isn't that the guy from—" "Ladies and gentlemen," Mayor Chen announced, "Marcus Ellison." Pike's carefully maintained smile cracked. He gripped the back of a chair, knuckles white. This wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't manageable. Marcus reached the podium, his expression calm, but his eyes intense as they swept the room. The Bible waited on the wooden surface, worn leather catching the light. He placed his left hand upon it, raised his right, and spoke the oath in a clear, carrying voice. "I, Marcus Ellison, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of this state, and the laws and ordinances of the city of Stone Ridge. I will faithfully, honestly, and impartially discharge the duties of Chief of Police to the best of my ability. So help me God." Mayor Chen beamed. "Congratulations, Chief Ellison." The applause was scattered, uncertain. Some officers sat stone-faced. Others clapped mechanically, eyes darting to Pike for cues. In the back, Miss Wheezy dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, smile radiant. Marcus adjusted the microphone. His voice filled the chamber, steady and determined. "Thank you, Mayor Chen. To the council, my fellow officers, and most importantly, to the citizens of Stone Ridge, I stand before you today with clear purpose." He paused, letting his gaze meet Kessler's for just a moment. A police department is only as strong as the trust it builds with its community. That trust must be earned daily, through actions that prove we serve everyone equally, through accountability that shows no one is above the law. Pike shifted his weight, hands clasped behind his back. His mind raced through political connections, favors owed, pressure points to exploit. "Starting today," Marcus continued, "we implement new standards for transparency and conduct. Body cameras will be mandatory and properly maintained. Complaint procedures will be streamlined and publicly accessible. De-escalation training will be enhanced." In the audience, Sergeant Doyle nodded slowly, hope mixing with worry on his weathered face. "Some will resist these changes," Marcus acknowledged. "Change is hard, but necessary change cannot be blocked by comfortable corruption or convenient silence." The words hung in the air like thunder before lightning. Pike's face had gone from red to gray. Kessler's jaw clenched so tight, a muscle twitched visibly. "To those officers who serve with honor, and there are many of you, I look forward to working together. To those who've forgotten their oath," Marcus's tone hardened slightly, "remember it now. This department will protect and serve everyone in Stone Ridge, every citizen, every child. No exceptions." The speech concluded with details about community outreach and modernization plans, but the real message had landed. As the ceremony wound down, officers filed out in groups, their usual banter replaced by tense whispers. Kessler shouldered his way through the crowd, rage radiating from every movement. He burst into Pike's office without knocking, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the plaques on the wall. "You didn't tell me it was him," he snarled. Pike stood at his window, watching the crowd disperse below. "I didn't know," he said through clenched teeth. "Bullshit! You know everything that moves in this department." Kessler paced like a caged animal. "This is about the park. That kid?" "Shut up!" Pike spun around. "Just shut up and listen. You want to survive this? Then fix it. Quietly." "Fix what? He's the damn chief now." "Everyone has pressure points," Pike hissed. "Everyone has weaknesses. Find them. Document them. But quietly." He jabbed a finger at Kessler's chest. "And until then, keep your hands off kids in the park. Are we clear?" Kessler glared but nodded stiffly. Outside, Marcus stood on the City Hall steps, shaking hands with well-wishers. Miss Wheezy approached, eyes bright with victory. "Congratulations, Chief Ellison," she said warmly. "Thank you, Miss Wheezy." He smiled, genuine but determined. "We've got work to do." "That we do," she agreed, patting his arm. "That we do." Morning light filtered through the blinds of Marcus's new office, casting stripes across stacks of personnel files and policy manuals. He'd been chief for 3 days, and already the weight of what he'd inherited pressed down like a mountain. His computer screen glowed with body camera logs from last Saturday. The timestamp matched, 10:47 a.m., Veterans Green. But where video should have been, a red flag marked Technical Error, Audio-Visual Malfunction. Marcus leaned back, rubbing his temples. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Sergeant Doyle entered, carrying a thick binder labeled Department Procedures, 2023. "Found something interesting in the union contract," Doyle said, dropping the binder on Marcus's desk. Page 342. Marcus flipped to the section, scanning quickly. Wellness diversion program? Started 2 years ago, Doyle explained, settling into a chair. Supposed to be about officer mental health, stress management, counseling resources. He tapped the page. But look at subsection C. Marcus read aloud. To promote psychological well-being and reduce administrative burden, all Category 3 complaints shall be automatically archived after 90 days if no formal charges are filed. Category 3, Doyle continued, includes minor physical contact, verbal disputes, and procedural complaints. Basically, anything short of hospitalization gets wiped clean every 3 months. Marcus's jaw tightened. How many complaints has Kessler had? That's the thing. Doyle pulled out a thin folder. Official record shows 2 in 5 years. Both resolved through informal counseling. But, he hesitated. But what? I talked to records. Before this program, they used to keep paper complaint logs. Basic stuff. Date, officer, type of incident. Found one from 2021 in a storage box. Kessler had 11 complaints that year alone. All Category 3, all vanished when the new system kicked in. Marcus stood, pacing to the window. Outside, patrol cars gleamed in the morning sun. The body cam malfunction. That's not random, is it? No, sir. Officers can mute audio for private conversations. Visual cuts out sometimes, too. Technical glitch, they say. No way to prove otherwise once it's done. Marcus returned to his desk, pulling up Kessler's service record. Commendations, training certificates, perfect attendance. A sanitized history, scrubbed clean every 90 days. Get me everything you can find, Marcus ordered. Old logs, witness statements, anything paper, and find out who wrote this program. Already did. Doyle's expression darkened. Harold Pike. He pitched it to the union as officer protection. Mayor's office approved it without review. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. How's Jaden's case going? He set it aside, guilt mixing with determination. He spent the next hours digging deeper. The wellness program had tentacles everywhere. Complaint forms routed through union review, body cam footage marked for quality control, performance evaluations sanitized for officer privacy. By late afternoon, his office looked like a war room. Papers covered every surface, red strings connecting dates and names on a whiteboard. Patterns emerged. Incidents in parks, schools, suspicious person stops. Always Category 3, always gone in 90 days. A soft knock interrupted his focus. Officer Martinez stood in the doorway, nervous energy radiating from her uniform. Chief, got a minute? Marcus gestured to a chair. Martinez closed the door carefully before sitting. It's about Kessler, she said quietly. Last year I saw him rough up a teenager behind the library. Nothing major, pushed him around, scared him pretty bad. Kid was just reading comics. Did you report it? Tried to. Filed the paperwork. Followed up 3 times. After 90 days, couldn't find any record it happened. She twisted her hands. I started keeping my own notes after that. Names, dates, witnesses. Never official, just in case. Marcus leaned forward. I need those notes. They're in my locker. I'll get them to you tonight. She stood to leave, then paused. Chief, some of us, we want things to change. But Pike has eyes everywhere. I understand. Thank you, officer. After she left, Marcus pulled up the department budget. The wellness program cost $180,000 annually. Consulting fees, software licenses, administrative support. All to make problems disappear. Doyle returned as sunset painted the office orange. He carried a dusty cardboard box. Found these in the basement. Complaint logs from 2018-2021, before the purge system. Plus some interesting emails about the program setup. He set the box down heavily. Pike wasn't subtle back then. Called it prophylactic record management in one memo. Marcus lifted a stack of faded forms. Each one represented someone who'd sought justice and found only silence. His son's face flashed in his mind. The shock, the fear, the betrayal. "Sir?" Doyle's voice was careful. "What's our next move?" "First, we document everything. Every purged complaint, every technical error, every convenient gap. Build a pattern too big to ignore." Marcus's voice hardened. "Then we rip this system apart. Pike won't go quietly. He's got friends in the mayor's office, the DA. Let him fight," Marcus said. "Everything he does to protect this program just proves why it needs to end." He picked up the union contract, reading the purge clause again. The words blurred with fatigue and anger. "This wasn't broken," he muttered, setting down the paper. "It was built this way." The office fell silent except for the shuffle of papers and the soft hum of Marcus's computer. Outside his window, the sun set on another day in Stone Ridge, where justice had a 90-day expiration date, and truth vanished with the click of a button. Harold Pike's corner office at the police union building overlooked the courthouse square. Late afternoon shadows stretched across his polished desk as District Attorney Carla Mendoza settled into a leather chair, her expression guarded. "Thanks for coming, Carla." Pike's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Coffee?" "Let's skip the pleasantries, Harold." Mendoza smoothed her blazer. "What's so urgent?" Pike retrieved a folder from his desk drawer. "Our new chief has me concerned. His personal involvement in this Kessler situation is problematic." "You mean because Officer Kessler slapped his son?" Mendoza's tone was dry. "Most fathers would be personally involved." "That's exactly my point." Pike spread photos across the desk. Marcus arguing with Kessler at the park. Copies of the civilian complaint. Screenshots of social media posts. He's using his position to pursue a personal vendetta. Look at these audit requests. Body cam footage, complaint histories, personnel files. He's building a case while presenting himself as an impartial administrator. Mendoza picked up one of the photos. The witness statements are compelling. Miss Carter's account is emotional testimony from a retiree with an agenda. Pike cut in. "What we have is a minor incident that escalated because a child refused lawful commands. Now the father happens to be chief. And suddenly, it's a crusade? A police officer struck a 9-year-old, Harold. After that 9-year-old was caught damaging park property." Pike slid forward a maintenance report. The birdhouse violated city ordinances. When confronted, the boy became confrontational. Mendoza's eyebrows rose. "That's not how other witnesses described it. Witnesses see what fits their narrative." Pike leaned back, steepling his fingers. "But you know what matters? Precedent. If we let a personally compromised chief pursue charges against an officer for standard crowd control, what's next? Every arrest becomes brutality? Every command becomes harassment? You're suggesting I decline to file charges? I'm suggesting you recognize a conflict of interest." Pike's voice softened. "Remember the Martinez settlement in 2019? How carefully we managed public perception. Sometimes peace requires discretion." Mendoza stiffened. The Martinez case, another excessive force complaint, buried under carefully worded agreements. She'd helped craft those agreements. The optics here are manageable. Pike tapped his computer screen. Social media's already shifting the narrative. Look. Online comments scrolled past. Chief's kid vandalized public property. Another entitled brat playing victim. These people always cry racism. Time to take our town back. Mendoza's stomach turned. Manufactured outrage won't change facts. Facts are flexible, Carla. You know that. Pike's smile returned. All I'm asking is that you consider the bigger picture. Stone Ridge doesn't need another racial powder keg. Declining charges protects everyone, including you. The threat hung unspoken. Mendoza stood, gathering her purse. I'll review the evidence carefully before making any decisions. That's all I ask. Pike walked her to the door. Oh, and Carla? Remember, peace keeps us all employed. Across town, Vivian Ellison's hands shook as she scrolled through her phone. Comment after hateful comment filled local news sites and neighborhood groups. Little Thug got what he deserved. Like father, like son, playing the race card. Send them back where they came from. Time to clean up our parks. Some included Jaden's school photo, shared without permission. Others mentioned their address. Vivian screenshot everything, her anger building with each swipe. She called Marcus at work. They're attacking our baby online, calling him. I can't even repeat it. Save everything, Marcus said, his voice tight. I'm heading to the DA's office now. Be careful, Vivian warned. They're trying to bait you into something stupid. I know. Marcus sighed. How's Jaden? Drawing. He's stronger than they know. Vivian watched their son through the kitchen window, bent over his sketchbook in the backyard. But he shouldn't have to be this strong. Not at 9. Marcus found Carla Mendoza in her office, reviewing case files. She didn't look up when he entered. Chief Ellison, I was about to call you. Were you? Marcus remained standing. To explain why you're considering declining charges? Now she met his eyes. Who told you that? Does it matter? What matters is you're choosing political convenience over justice. Again. Again. Her face tightened. Careful, Chief. Like you were careful with the Martinez settlement? All those sealed documents? All those convenient NDAs? Marcus placed his hands on her desk, leaning forward. How many times have you helped bury police misconduct, Carla? I've helped maintain order, she snapped. Something you seem determined to disrupt. Order? My son has a bruised face and nightmares. There are racists threatening him online. That's the order you're protecting? Mendoza stood, matching his posture. I'm protecting this town from burning down around us. You're too close to this case. Your judgment is compromised. My judgment? Marcus's laugh was bitter. A cop slapped a child in broad daylight. Witnesses, photos, statements, and you're worried about my judgment? I'm worried about escalation, riots, property damage, career-ending scandals that help no one. You mean scandals that might expose your past decisions? Marcus straightened. You're choosing safety over justice. Mendoza was silent for a long moment, studying him. Finally, she sank back into her chair. I'm choosing what keeps this town from burning. She gestured to the door. We're done here, Chief. I'll announce my decision tomorrow. Marcus turned to leave, then paused. You know what burns towns, Carla? Not justice, injustice. Remember that when you're helping Pike bury more bodies. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Mendoza stared at her reflection in the darkened window, wondering when compromise had become cowardice. The morning sun bathed Veterans Green in golden light as Miss Wheezy arranged folding chairs in a wide circle near Jaden's favorite sycamore tree. Her arthritic hands moved with purpose, each chair placed just so. Behind her, a dozen seniors from her church group hung colorful birdhouses in the trees, a silent rebuke to those who'd claimed Jaden had vandalized the park. Little more to the left, Richard, she called to a gray-haired man struggling with a green wooden house. We want the sparrows to have a good view of today's proceedings. People began trickling into the park. Mothers with strollers, joggers slowing their pace, teenagers on bikes. They gathered in small clusters, voices low but determined. Miss Wheezy noticed several carrying signs. Protect our children, and No badge gives the right to hit kids. Councilwoman Dina Brooks strode across the grass, her red blazer bright against the morning sky. She carried a small portable microphone and speaker. "Louise," she called warmly, "you've outdone yourself. This is exactly what we needed. Peaceful, organized, impossible to ignore." "Peaceful doesn't mean quiet," Miss Wheezy replied, adjusting her glasses. "These old bones have seen too much injustice to stay silent now." More seniors arrived, carrying thermoses of coffee and plates of cookies. They set up a card table with petitions demanding police accountability. Miss Wheezy watched as they worked, her notebook open on her lap. She'd documented everything since the incident: times, names, statements. The truth would not be buried this time. The crowd grew steadily. Church groups arrived in their Sunday best. Young activists with cameras mingled with grandmothers in sun hats. A news van parked at the curb, a reporter testing her microphone. Marcus appeared at the edge of the gathering, Jaden's small hand in his. The boy wore a clean white shirt, his cheek still showing faint yellowing from the bruise. People parted to let them through, offering quiet words of support. "There's my brave artist," Miss Wheezy said, patting the chair beside her. Jaden sat down, ducking his head shyly at the attention. Marcus stood behind them, scanning the growing crowd with careful eyes. Councilwoman Brooks tapped the microphone. "Good morning, Stone Ridge," she began, her voice carrying across the park. "We're here today because silence enables injustice. We're here because a child's safety matters more than a badge." She spoke for 10 minutes about equality, about the poison of unchecked power, about the courage of speaking truth. The crowd listened intently, nodding, occasionally calling out in agreement. "And now," Brooks said, "I'd like to introduce someone who reminds us what this fight is really about. Jaden?" The boy looked up at his father. Marcus squeezed his shoulder gently. "It's okay, son. Just speak from your heart." Jaden walked slowly to where Brooks stood. She lowered the microphone for him. He stared at his feet for a long moment, then lifted his face to the crowd. "I just wanted to help the birds," he said softly. "My dad taught me that kindness matters. That's why I was building the birdhouse. I wasn't trying to cause trouble." His voice grew stronger. "Nobody should hit kids. Nobody should make us feel scared to help others." The silence that followed was profound. Then applause erupted, spreading through the crowd like waves. Miss Wheezy wiped tears from her cheeks. Several news cameras zoomed in on Jaden's face as he hurried back to his seat. Marcus remained standing, his expression controlled but proud. He'd chosen not to speak, letting others carry this moment. His battle would be fought in conference rooms and policy meetings, but this gathering of community voices, was just as vital. The morning continued with more speakers. Church leaders offered prayers for healing. Young activists shared statistics about police misconduct. Seniors told stories of past struggles for justice. Through it all, Miss Wheezy kept writing in her notebook, recording every word, every reaction. News crews interviewed people on the edges of the crowd. The story was spreading beyond Stone Ridge now. Brooks spoke with reporters, her words measured but forceful. "This isn't about one incident. This is about systematic abuse of power and the courage to stand against it." As the sun climbed higher, people began sharing water bottles and snacks. Children played tag between the chairs. The mood was serious but hopeful, a community finding its voice. Jaden pulled out his sketchbook, drawing the scene with careful strokes. The circle of chairs, the hanging birdhouses, the diverse faces of his neighbors. Miss Wheezy peered over his shoulder. "You're capturing it perfectly," she said. "Art tells truth in its own way." The gathering began to disperse as afternoon approached. People lingered in small groups, exchanging phone numbers and promises to stay connected. Marcus helped fold chairs, speaking quietly with Brooks about next steps. Later that night, The Ellison household was quiet. Jaden sat at his bedroom window, watching as his mother worked in the glow of the garage floodlight. The harsh words spray-painted across their door, "Traitor in blue," disappeared under steady strokes of fresh paint. Vivian worked methodically, her nurse's scrubs still on from her shift. She didn't speak, didn't curse, just painted with quiet determination. The white paint covered the hate, but the message behind it lingered in the air like poison. From his window, Jaden watched his mother work, his sketchbook open on his lap. He drew her figure, small against the garage door, erasing darkness with light. His hand moved quickly, capturing the moment before it faded. Another scene of truth that needed remembering. Marcus sat at his desk early Tuesday morning, reviewing witness statements from Veterans Green. His phone buzzed, a text from Doyle. "DA's office, now." The message carried urgency that made his stomach tighten. He drove downtown through morning traffic, past coffee shops opening their doors and students waiting for buses. The district attorney's building loomed ahead, all glass and steel reaching into the pale sky. Carla Mendoza's office occupied the third floor. Her assistant barely glanced up as Marcus entered the waiting area. "She's expecting you," she said flatly. Inside, Mendoza stood by her window, hands clasped behind her back. She turned as Marcus entered, her face a careful mask of professional detachment. "Chief Ellison." "Please, sit." "I'll stand," Marcus replied, noting the thick folder on her desk labeled Kessler Incident. Mendoza sighed, settling into her chair. "I'll be direct. After thorough review, my office has determined there's insufficient evidence to pursue charges against Officer Kessler." Marcus felt heat rise in his neck. Insufficient evidence? There were dozens of witnesses. Miss Wheezy's statement alone. "Witness accounts vary," Mendoza cut in. "And more importantly, we cannot establish clear intent to cause harm. Officer Kessler maintains he was responding to perceived resistance. He slapped a 9-year-old boy." Marcus's voice filled the room. "My son was building a birdhouse. There's no justification." "Your personal involvement complicates matters," Mendoza said smoothly. "The fact that you're both the victim's father and Kessler's superior officer creates significant conflicts of interest." Marcus leaned forward, placing both palms on her desk. "This isn't about me. This is about a police officer abusing his power against a child. You have sworn statements, physical evidence. We have contradictory accounts of a heated situation," Mendoza countered. "The union's report suggests Jaden was uncooperative." "Don't you dare put this on my son." Mendoza's expression hardened. "Chief Ellison, I understand you're upset, but my decision is final. I suggest you focus on internal department matters and let this go." Marcus straightened, studying her face. "You're scared," he said quietly. "What do they have on you, Carla?" She flinched, just slightly, but enough. "That's inappropriate and unprofessional. We're done here." Back at the station, Marcus found Doyle waiting in his office. The sergeant's face was grim. "You heard?" "Just left Mendoza's office." Marcus dropped into his chair. "She's buried worse than this before, hasn't she?" Doyle glanced at the closed door, then pulled out a folded paper. "Found something in the archived files. June 2019. Excessive force complaint against Kessler. Black maintenance worker. Same park. Case never made it to review." Marcus scanned the document. "Settlement agreement? With an NDA. Guess who witnessed the signing?" Doyle's voice was bitter. "Our dear district attorney herself." Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang. Mayor Tisdale's office. The mayor's voice was strained. "Marcus, we need to talk. Now." 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in Tisdale's office as the mayor paced behind his desk. "This situation has become untenable," Tisdale said. "The union is threatening a vote of no confidence. Pike's people are calling you a divisive figure who's using your position for personal vengeance. So we're letting them control the narrative? Marcus asked. I'm placing you on administrative leave, Tisdale said quickly, like ripping off a bandage. Effective immediately. Pending review of your handling of the situation. Marcus didn't move. You're suspending me for investigating officer misconduct? For compromising department neutrality, Tisdale corrected. Your personal involvement. My personal involvement is exactly why I can't walk away, Marcus cut in. That officer assaulted my son, and now I find out there's a pattern, covered up by the very people meant to prevent it. Marcus, please! Tisdale's voice dropped. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Take some time, let things cool down. Outside, Pike stood talking to reporters, his voice carrying through the window. Chief Ellison's actions have created a dangerous divide between law enforcement and leadership. His personal agenda threatens the stability of this department. Marcus unclipped his badge, placed it on Tisdale's desk. The metal made a dull sound against the wood. You know what they're protecting. You know this isn't right. Marcus. I'll take the leave, Marcus said, stepping back. But understand something. They're not pushing me out because I'm wrong. They're doing it because I'm close to the truth. He drove home slowly, the morning sun now high and harsh. Vivian's car was in the driveway. She'd taken the day off to be with Jaden. Inside, she took one look at his face and knew. They suspended you, she said. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded, sinking onto their couch. Mendoza won't prosecute. Says there's insufficient evidence of intent. He laughed humorlessly. But there's more. Kessler has history. Another assault in 2019, same park. They buried it with settlements and NDAs. Vivian sat beside him, took his hand. They want you gone, because you're a threat. They want me out, Marcus agreed, squeezing her fingers. That means I'm close. In his room upstairs, Jaden worked on a new drawing, a police badge lying in grass, its surface reflecting storm clouds. The boy's art had taken a darker turn since the incident, but its honesty remained pure, truth seen through a child's eyes, unafraid to show what adults tried to hide. The kitchen table groaned under the weight of scattered papers, files, and laptops. Marcus had transformed their dining room into a war room, surrounded by allies who refused to let injustice stand. Miss Wheezy sat straight-backed in her chair, her meticulous notebook open before her. Doyle hunched over dispatch logs, while Sarah Chen, the town's head librarian, analyzed data on her laptop. Let's lay out what we have, Marcus said, spreading a park map across the table. Miss Wheezy, your timeline first. The retired teacher adjusted her reading glasses. I documented everything, minute by minute. She ran her finger down neat rows of handwriting. 10:47 a.m. Officer Kessler's truck arrived. 10:52, first confrontation with Jaden. 10:55, physical contact initiated. Her voice tightened. 10:56, the assault. Your notes are incredibly detailed, Doyle said, comparing them to his papers. Matches dispatch perfectly. Kessler called in his location at 10:46, went silent at 10:54. Marcus nodded. 2-minute gap before the slap. What was he doing with his radio off? Same pattern I'm seeing here, Sarah said, tapping her screen. I've cross-referenced body cam timestamps with incident reports. 11 separate encounters over 6 months, all involving black residents, all with convenient technical errors during key moments. 11? Vivian's voice was sharp. She stood at the counter, preparing another pot of coffee. That's not coincidence. Not even close, Sarah agreed. The statistical probability of random malfunctions targeting only one demographic? Practically zero. Jaden appeared in the doorway, clutching his sketchbook. He'd been quiet since the incident, processing through his art. Marcus softened his voice. "Hey, buddy, want to show them what you drew?" The boy nodded, approaching the table. He opened to a detailed sketch of Veterans Green, marking everyone's positions that morning. X's showed where people stood. Arrows tracked movement. Even the trees were accurately placed. "This is excellent," Miss Wheezy said, squeezing his shoulder. "You have a wonderful memory for detail." "Look at the sight lines," Doyle said, studying the drawing. "Park cameras would have caught everything from this angle." He pointed to a pole. "Unless someone deliberately turned them." Marcus spread out subpoena requests. "We need the 2019 settlement records, maintenance logs for those cameras, every email between Pike and the wellness program administrators. The union will fight these," Doyle warned. "Let them," Marcus replied. "Fighting looks worse than complying." Sarah raised her hand. "I found something else. Those 11 encounters, they all happened within 90 days of each other, just under the purge threshold." The room went quiet. Vivian set coffee mugs on the table, her nurse's hands steady and sure. "He knew the timeline," she said. "Knew exactly when to push it." "Pike's program gave him coverage," Marcus agreed. "Question is, was he working alone?" Miss Wheezy flipped through her notebook. "I've seen that truck before. Always slow passes through the park, always when certain families were there." She tapped a page. 7 times in May alone. "Targeting," Doyle said grimly. "Deliberate pattern of intimidation." Jaden had started another drawing. This one showed Kessler's face. Not angry, but scared. The boy had captured something in the officer's eyes, a weakness behind the rage. "He's afraid," Jaden said quietly. "That's why he hits. Like Tommy Miller when he's scared at school." The adults exchanged looks. From the mouths of babes, Marcus thought. "We need to present this properly," Sarah said. "Raw data isn't enough. People need to see the pattern." She pulled up a visualization she'd created. A timeline showing Kessler's documented encounters, radio silences, and camera failures. Red dots clustered around specific days, specific locations. "This is good," Marcus said. "But we need more. Doyle, can you get complete radio transcripts?" "Already requested, and maintenance logs for his body cam. Every reported malfunction." "Miss Wheezy, we'll need signed statements from other witnesses, as detailed as possible." The retired teacher patted her bag. "Already started collecting them. Church ladies see everything, you know." Vivian studied the subpoena requests. The 2019 settlement. That victim might talk now. If Kessler violated the terms, by assaulting another person? "Absolutely," Doyle confirmed. "NDA becomes void." Marcus checked his watch. Nearly midnight. They'd been at this for hours, building their case piece by piece. The truth was there, hidden in dispatches and data, in witness statements, and a child's honest art. "We're not just fighting one bad officer," he said. "We're exposing a system designed to protect him, to hide people like him." "Good," Miss Wheezy said firmly. "Break it all open. Let the sun shine in." Jaden had fallen asleep on the couch, his sketchbook open to the drawing of Kessler. Vivian brought a blanket, tucking it around him. She studied their kitchen table, covered in evidence of corruption, yes, but also proof of community, people who refused to look away. She touched Marcus's shoulder, her voice low but strong. "You have what you need. Now show them who you are." The words settled over the room like a mandate. Tomorrow would bring more fights, more resistance. But tonight, in this kitchen, truth was taking shape. Every document, every time stamp, every careful observation, pieces of a puzzle revealing the larger picture. They had built their case on facts, not fury, on documented patterns, not just raw pain. Most importantly, they'd built it together, cop and teacher, librarian and nurse, witnesses and whistleblowers. Even a young boy's unflinching art told part of the story. This wasn't just Marcus's fight anymore. It belonged to all of them now. The old police station gym smelled of dust and sweat, metal chairs crammed between weight racks and exercise machines. Sunlight filtered through high windows, casting long shadows across the packed room. Community members filled every seat, lined the walls, and spilled into the hallway. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Marcus sat at a folding table with his evidence neatly arranged, Vivian and Miss Wheezy flanking him like sentries. Across the makeshift aisle, Kessler slouched between Pike and their union lawyer, shooting venomous glares that bounced off Marcus's calm exterior. Commissioner Chen called the oversight hearing to order, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "We're here to address serious allegations of misconduct and systemic issues within the department." Pike stood first, straightening his tie. "This is a witch hunt," he declared, pacing like he owned the room. "A personally motivated attack by a compromised chief against a decorated officer. Officer Kessler has served this community faithfully for 8 years." Marcus remained seated, letting Pike's bluster wash over him. He'd learned long ago that truth didn't need theatrics. "The facts tell a different story," Marcus said, when Pike finished. He opened his laptop, connecting it to the projector. Sarah's timeline filled the wall, a damning constellation of red dots marking Kessler's pattern. 11 documented encounters, Marcus continued. 11 technical malfunctions with body cameras. 11 black citizens. All within the 90-day complaint purge window. He let that sink in. This isn't coincidence. This is methodology. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Kessler's face reddened, but Pike touched his arm, a warning to stay quiet. Marcus laid out dispatch logs next. Radio silence during critical moments. Park camera outages that align perfectly with reported incidents. He pointed to highlighted timestamps. The system didn't fail. It was manipulated. "Speculation," Pike snapped. "You can't prove intent." "Actually, we can." Marcus nodded to Doyle, who opened the door. A man in his 30s entered. Michael Washington, the 2019 victim. Kessler's face went pale. "Mr. Washington signed a non-disclosure agreement after Officer Kessler assaulted him in Veterans Green 4 years ago," Marcus said. "An agreement that included a morality clause." Pike shot to his feet. "That settlement is sealed." "Was sealed," Marcus corrected. "The morality clause voids the NDA if the officer commits similar misconduct, like assaulting a 9-year-old boy in the same park." Washington took the microphone, his voice steady. "I was walking my dog when Officer Kessler stopped me. Said I matched a description. When I asked what description, he got angry. Grabbed my arm, threw me down. Called me names I won't repeat here." The room was dead silent. Washington continued. "I filed a complaint. Next thing I know, I'm being pressured to sign papers. Take the money. Keep quiet. Move away. They said no one would believe me anyway." Kessler surged up, face twisted. "You're lying! Pike, tell them he's lying!" But Pike had gone still, eyes darting between Washington and the exit. His carefully constructed shield was cracking. "The settlement details are now public record," Marcus said, sliding copies to the commissioners, along with evidence of systemic complaint suppression through the wellness program. A program designed specifically to protect officers like Kessler while silencing victims like Mr. Washington. Miss Wheezy stood, her notebook raised. "I witnessed both incidents. The pattern is identical. Provocation, escalation, violence, then denial and cover-up." The crowd erupted in shouts and questions. Commissioner Chen banged her gavel for order. Through the chaos, Pike leaned close to Kessler, hissing, "Keep your mouth shut." Kessler jerked away, eyes wild. "You used me!" he snarled, loud enough for the microphones to catch. Set me up to take the fall while you covered your tracks. Marcus watched the unraveling with grim satisfaction. The truth had done its work, exposing not just one officer's brutality, but an entire machinery of protection and denial. In the harsh gym lighting, there was nowhere left to hide. Jaden's drawings were projected next, precise, unflinching depictions of both incidents. The boy's art captured what reports couldn't: the fear, the power imbalance, the calculated cruelty. Several commissioners wiped their eyes. "This isn't about one slap," Marcus said into the tense silence. "It's about a system that enabled and protected a pattern of abuse. A system that treated certain citizens as acceptable targets. That stops today." Washington nodded slowly. "That's why I came back. Not for revenge. For change." The commissioners huddled, whispering urgently. Pike's face had gone ashen, his empire of silence crumbling. Kessler sat rigid, abandoned by his protectors, finally facing consequences that couldn't be buried in paperwork. Community members pressed forward, sharing their own stories of encounters with Kessler. Each account reinforced the pattern: the selective targeting, the convenient technical failures, the pressure to stay quiet. Miss Wheezy's careful documentation provided timestamps and details that aligned perfectly with dispatch records. Sarah's data analysis revealed the statistical impossibility of random malfunction. Doyle's internal records exposed the deliberate manipulation of evidence. The truth, so long suppressed, was breaking free. And in that old gym, under fluorescent lights and decades of dust, justice was finally finding its voice. The afternoon sun sliced through the hallway's dusty windows as Marcus stepped out during the hearing recess. His shoulders ached from tension, but the evidence was solid. Years of abuse and cover-ups were finally exposed. He loosened his tie, needing air. The old station's corridors felt too narrow, too confined. Footsteps echoed behind him. Heavy, angry steps he recognized instantly. "You think you've won?" Kessler's voice dripped with venom. "Think you can just waltz in here and destroy everything?" Marcus turned slowly, maintaining the professional distance that had become second nature. "Officer Kessler, this isn't personal. The evidence speaks for itself." "Not personal?" Kessler's laugh was ugly. "You used your own kid to set me up. Probably told him to cause trouble, didn't you?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "My son was building a birdhouse. You chose to assault him. That's what you people always do. Play victim." Kessler stepped closer, face flushed. 8 years on the force. 8 years keeping order in this town. Then you show up with your diversity hiring and your reforms. "Step back," Marcus warned, noting Kessler's clenched fists. Other officers and hearing attendees began filtering into the hallway, drawn by the rising voices. Or what? Kessler's eyes were wild now. "You'll suspend me again? File more complaints? I owned these streets before you came along with your fancy degree and your peaceful solutions." Marcus stayed calm, hands visible at his sides. "This isn't about ownership. It's about justice." "Justice?" Kessler spat the word. "I'll show you justice." His hand shot toward his belt, not for his weapon, but his body camera. "Let me turn this off first, like always." "Leave it on," Marcus said. "Let everyone hear exactly who you are." Something snapped in Kessler's expression. "Who I am?" His voice rose to a shout. "I'm the one who keeps animals like you in line." The racial slur echoed through the corridor. Gasps from the growing crowd. But before anyone could react, Kessler lunged forward, swinging wildly at Marcus's face. Marcus's training kicked in automatically. He stepped inside the punch, deflecting it with his forearm while pivoting to trap Kessler's extended arm. The move was smooth, controlled. the product of countless hours in the academy. "Don't," Marcus warned, holding the position without applying pressure. But Kessler was beyond warnings. He thrashed and cursed, each word more vile than the last, his face contorted with decades of barely hidden hatred. "You uppity son of a—" Another swing, another careful block. Marcus could have ended it quickly, could have used any number of holds to put Kessler down. Instead, he maintained defensive control, letting Kessler's rage expose itself fully. "Can't fight back, can you?" Kessler taunted, struggling. "Too afraid of looking like the angry black man? That's all you are under that suit." The crowd pressed against the walls, phones recording everything. Miss Wheezy's hand covered her mouth in shock. Vivian watched with fierce pride as her husband remained professional despite the onslaught. Suddenly, Kessler's voice boomed through the gym's speakers. His body mic was live, feeding directly into the hearing room's audio system. Every slur, every threat, every revelation of prejudice amplified for all to hear. "Should have hit that kid harder, taught him respect." The words thundered through the building. From inside the gym came sounds of outrage and dismay. Kessler didn't seem to notice or care, lost in his meltdown. "8 years!" he screamed. 8 years of keeping them in their place. Pike promised me backup, promised the complaints would disappear. Doyle pushed through the crowd, cuffs ready. "That's enough." Kessler's eyes widened as he finally registered his mic's red light. The fight drained from him instantly, replaced by dawning horror. "Officer Brent Kessler," Doyle's voice was steel. "You're under arrest for assault on a police officer, making terrorist threats, and violation of department policy." Marcus stepped back, straightening his tie as Doyle secured the cuffs. The hallway had gone deathly quiet. Even Kessler fell silent, the full weight of his actions crushing down. Phones lowered slowly. The crowd parted as Doyle led Kessler away. Through the open doors, Marcus could see the hearing room. Commissioners frozen in their seats. Pike slumped in defeat. Hundreds of witnesses to a truth that could no longer be denied. Miss Wheezy touched Marcus's arm. "You all right, Chief?" He nodded, checking his suit for damage. "Just another day seeking justice, Miss Wheezy." The silence held, heavy with the weight of what they'd witnessed. Decades of systemic racism and abuse had just been laid bare in 2 minutes of unfiltered rage. No reports to sanitize it. No union to bury it. Just raw truth, broadcast live to the entire hearing. Vivian appeared at his side, inspecting him for injuries. "Not exactly how we plan to expose the corruption," she said quietly. "Sometimes justice finds its own path," Marcus replied, watching Kessler disappear around the corner. The officer's shouts still echoed from the speakers, a testament that would be impossible to erase. The crowd began to disperse, murmuring in shocked tones. But they moved differently now, with purpose, with clarity. What had been suspicion was now certainty. What had been whispers was now on record. Marcus straightened his shoulders, ready to return to the hearing. There was still work to be done, policies to change, a department to rebuild. But the foundation of lies had cracked wide open, and truth was pouring through. 2 weeks after the hearing, autumn painted veterans green in gold and crimson. The morning air carried a crisp edge as Marcus sat in his restored office, reading the State Attorney General's formal announcement. The charges against Kessler were comprehensive: assault on a minor, tampering with evidence, civil rights violations, each count backed by witness statements, audio recordings, and the damning pattern of technical errors in his body camera usage. The AG's office had also uncovered a trail of similar incidents spanning 3 counties. Marcus set down the paper and glanced at the photo on his desk. Jaden smiling at his science fair, taken just days before the incident. The bruise had faded, but some marks went deeper. Still, His son's resilience amazed him. Last night, Jaden had asked to help with the park's reopening ceremony. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Sergeant Doyle entered, holding a tablet. "Chief, you'll want to see this." The screen showed D.A. Mendoza's resignation speech. She stood at a podium, her usual confidence replaced by visible strain. "After careful reflection and the Ethics Board's preliminary findings, I am stepping down effective immediately. My failure to address prior incidents and subsequent attempts to minimize recent events represent a breach of public trust." "That's 3 down," Doyle said, referring to Pike's spectacular fall last week. The union president's hot mic rant about these people taking over had leaked online, forcing his immediate resignation. The recording captured him instructing officers to lose complaint forms from certain neighborhoods. "Change comes in waves," Marcus replied, standing to put on his jacket. "Speaking of which, how's the new training going?" "Officers are adapting to the body cam integrity protocols. No more self-muting, full audit trails. The complaint preservation order means everything gets logged properly now. And that duty to intervene reform you pushed through? Already seeing results. Junior officers feel more empowered to speak up." Marcus nodded, checking his watch. "Time for the reopening. You coming?" Veterans Green hummed with activity. Volunteers set up chairs while parks workers installed new signs outlining the community rules, written with input from residents of all backgrounds. Children darted between trees, strung with paper lanterns for the evening celebration. Near the central path, Jaden and Miss Wheezy supervised a group installing birdhouses. Each one had been painted by local students, creating a rainbow of designs. Jaden took his role seriously, clipboard in hand, checking each mounting bracket. "A little higher on that one," he called to a worker. "Sparrows like more height." Miss Wheezy beamed with pride. Her testimony had been crucial in the hearing, her meticulous notes providing a timeline that couldn't be disputed. Now she sat in her usual spot, but with a new purpose, teaching children about birds and justice in equal measure. From the corner of his eye, Marcus spotted a familiar figure in an orange vest, picking up trash under a supervisor's watch. Kessler's decertification had been swift after the hearing. Now he performed his community service in the same park where everything had changed. His face was thinner, shoulders slumped, all traces of arrogance gone. Jaden noticed him too, but showed no fear. Instead, he walked over and handed Kessler a birdhouse, one he'd painted himself with careful brushstrokes. "This one goes by the oak tree," he said simply, then returned to his clipboard. The moment hung there, heavy with meaning. Kessler stared at the birdhouse, then slowly carried it to the designated tree. His hands shook slightly as he mounted it, following Jaden's precise instructions. Councilwoman Brooks approached Marcus, smiling. "Quite a transformation, isn't it? The park or the department?" "Both. Your reforms are setting a standard. Other cities are calling, wanting to implement similar changes." Marcus watched as more families arrived, spreading blankets on the grass. The fear that had gripped this space was dissolving, replaced by renewed purpose. Children from all backgrounds played together while parents chatted, sharing snacks and stories. Miss Wheezy's voice carried across the lawn. "Oh, look there!" A white-throated sparrow had landed on Jaden's first birdhouse, the one that started everything. It tilted its head, inspecting the entrance, then hopped inside. Jaden's face lit up with pure joy. "Justice sings too, sweetheart," Miss Wheezy said softly, patting his hand. "Sometimes we just have to be patient enough to hear it." The bird's clear notes filled the air, joining the sounds of laughter and conversation. Marcus felt the last knot of tension in his chest finally release. The park was healing. His department was changing. Most importantly, his son stood tall, unafraid. More sparrows arrived, checking out the new houses. Each one represented a small victory, proof that safe spaces could be rebuilt, that wrongs could be made right. The community had come together not just to demand justice, but to maintain it. The late afternoon sun caught the autumn leaves, setting them ablaze with color. Parents called children in for the ceremony. Miss Wheezy gathered her knitting. Jaden made one final check of his clipboard before joining his father. The white-throated sparrow's song continued, floating above the park like a benediction. Its melody carried notes of renewal, of second chances, of hard-won peace. In Veterans Green, justice had found its voice, not in shouts or sirens, but in the simple sound of birds coming home to roost. Marcus wrapped an arm around Jaden's shoulders as they walked toward the gathering crowd. The park was free again, its paths open to all, its spaces safe for dreams to take flight. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.